Hello! I'm Elaine, and I'm a tour guide in the French Quarter. I do ghost tours. And I am not going to tell you the stories that I tell on my tour, because you gotta pay for those. But if you want to hear some interesting things that have happened to me while I'm leading random drunk people around the French Quarter, I got you.
As usual, tonight's story involves people who were too drunk to be on a tour. So it's now a couple of weeks ago, but I had a night that I arrived, and I went into the store first because that's now my new norm. I go into the store, I chat with the people who work the store for a while, hang out in the back, let some of my guests gather, and then go out and greet them and sign them in and everything. And while I was in the back hanging out with some of the store employees, somebody came in and was asking where are we going to sign in and all the normal questions. But I could tell they were a little bit drunk. I could hear it in the girl's voice, but I was like, okay. And yeah, they were my guests. And it was just sort of like, okay, I'll be out to sign you in just a minute. And it was one of those nights that also a lot of tours were leaving at roughly the same time. So there were a lot of people there. And that's part of the reason I like to hang out in the back sometimes, because it's just so many people that adding one or two extras actually does add to the chaos. So sometimes it's easier to, when it's just the milling around time, to let the people mill around and then try to organize them in a few more minutes. And yeah, it got to the time that I needed to go out and start organizing people, gathering my folks, signing people in, making sure everyone knew to go to the bathroom before we get started, all the business stuff. And my group is already gathering across the road, so I go over to chat with them there. And I have several groups that I'm just chatting with, signing them in, telling them what's going on, all that shenanigans. And I look up and see that the pair that I had met in the store were coming out. And I was like, okay, that's our guest. They'll be here in a minute. And I turn back to talk to my guest and I hear oh, and I turn just in time to see that the couple that are trying to cross the street have started stumbling, and the girl starts to go down and the guy reaches for her, but he's not steady enough to hold her. So he just lands flat, face down on top of her in the middle of the road. And I was like, oh God. And of course, I'm getting ready to go over there and help, but a car's coming, so I have to wait till a car goes by to go over to the other side of the road to help them. And during this time, he tries to get, he gets up fine, but he tries to get his wife up, or girlfriend, whoever they were, and he can't get her up because he's not stable enough to get her to her feet. He tries 2 to 3 times, and they keep ending up back on the ground. And luckily, other groups were meeting on that side of the road, so there was somebody there to immediately reach over and try to help. And I'm looking over, and one of our other guides is trying to prop this guy up, and he's a big guy, so our guide is struggling. And finally, right when I'm about to rush over, the guy sort of walks to one of the poles that supports the gallery and is like, okay, hold on to this and we'll get the girl up. And collectively, they manage to get this woman to her feet. And she immediately starts stumbling out into traffic. And, they barely catch her. And I'm like, oh, I knew they were drunk. I didn't know they were that kind of drunk. And, they come over and I sign them in. And I do not tell them that they need to get drinks beforehand. I'm like, nope, 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 no drinks for them. And amazingly, they were actually sort of okay for the first stop. The girl did ask at least one ridiculous question, which now I don't remember what it was because it wasn't that ridiculous. It was just a general, slightly intoxicated question. And I was like, okay, this is fine. She's actually holding it together. Or more to the point, he's holding her. It's fine. And so we head off to the next stop. And I do that stop, which is really short. And afterwards, I'm I always give a warning of okay, now we're going to much darker, more disturbing stories. And the girl looks at me and goes, where are we going to the haunted house? And she shouts this. I'm pretty sure people could hear her on the edge of the quarter. And I'm like, we've been to a haunted house already. We'll be going to several haunted houses. Which one are you talking about? And she's like, the haunted house. And I'm like, there are a couple dozen haunted houses in the French Quarter alone. Which house are you talking about? And I'll be honest, yeah, I knew which house she was talking about. Chances of her talking about any house except for the Lalaurie Mansion were slim to nil. But I could have been wrong. So I was just asking for some clarity. And she just kept shouting, the haunted house! And finally I was like, probably, if it's the one that you're probably talking about in a couple of stops, but we're going to haunted houses throughout the night. And the next stop, her and her boy were like walking back and forth behind the group. Like they kept going all the way down the street to one end and all the way down the street to the other. And like I could tell they weren't going to be with us much longer. They were going to disappear. But they hadn't yet, so I kept having to focus on them and figure out where they are and if they're causing any damage. And I finished that stop and we're heading to the house I assume she was talking about. And like I go to be like, and now we're heading to the most famous haunted house, and she's gone. And I'm like, oops.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and feel free to share your own experiences in the comments below.